global news army was put in place before war erupted. On all sides of the conflict, media outlets were spun or controlled by governments. Independent reporter Robert Young Pelton, author of this best-selling travel book to the world's most dangerous places, had his eye on the media eye.
There was never any sense that we might go to war. It was always like, we're going to attack Saddam Hussein, and here's why. There was very much a script in how this war was handled. There was a kickoff.
Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours.
And then there was a countdown. You got 48 hours to get out of town. Then it was like everybody tuned in for the opening kickoff. As the war progressed, it was done on a linear scale. We're going from here to there. It was almost like we're running a pass. There were people actually drawing diagrams, generals drawing diagrams on a map that looked just like a football play. You know, we're going to go sneak around here, we're going to do this, and we're coming up there, and we're doing that.
This sports metaphor offered a simplified narrative mimicking a familiar TV format. When Pelton was delayed getting into Iraq, his focus became the press.
So I ended up being the only person embedded with journalists during the war in a fancy hotel in Jordan. Right now there's apparently 4,000 journalists everywhere from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan to Syria to Turkey, all waiting for the war to start. And some of these people have been sitting around for 9 weeks. They lived in very nice hotels. They were all on expense accounts. They met at the bar every night. They worked 24 hours a day.
The President will address the nation at 10:15.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The level of protection would be minimal, and if I were a news president or a news executive right now, I would be pulling my people out.
When the war had finally begun, the networks began pulling their reporters out of Baghdad. Peter Arnett was in the Iraqi capital with a National Geographic documentary team. He decided to stay.
Covering wars are a dangerous business. You can die, and those companies feel responsible for their people in harm's way. They sometimes order them out.
I think there is something to be said for staying. However, from a news executive standpoint, the risks are enormous.
You know, I sort of have a genetic tick that allows me to go into dangerous areas without too much concern.
The interesting thing is that the American military were trying to intimidate these journalists. They were saying, you know, you're going to be a target and everything. And the journalists were working overtime to say, look, we're here, this is our coordinates, don't fight here. And everybody knew that journalists were at these hotels. That's why they were at these hotels. It was also known that if you're going to have shock and awe, you need somebody to record it. I mean, the one thing that they left out was they needed the media to fight this war. The war was set up to be filmed and recorded by the media. So there was this bizarre symbiotic relationship.
Action to begin. CBS's David Martin at the Pentagon is following the planning and has the latest on a possible timeline.
To promote its war, the Pentagon made media management a priority. Their strategy was sophisticated, clever, and almost always covert. Few media outlets exposed it. Most participated willingly for their own political and economic reasons. Pentagon strategy went beyond traditional PR, using marketing strategies and perception management. Administration officials likened their war planning to a product rollout. It was all to guarantee there would be only one storyline in the media and in the minds of Americans, theirs. A Pentagon advisor told me it was intentional. They knew that TV networks prefer storytelling to sloganizing. Their storyline became a master narrative, defining Iraq as the problem and U.S. military intervention as the only solution. Traditionally, propaganda is targeted at the enemy. In this war, it was smoothly infiltrated into the news, aimed at American and global public opinion.
There are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we now know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we do not know, we don't know.
This platform is not a platform for propaganda. This is a platform for truth.
In his war plan, Tommy Franks, the U.S. military commander, described the press, once known as the Fourth Estate, as the Fourth Front. He knew that a supportive media was essential for victory, and he cultivated one.
This will be a campaign unlike any other in history.
The Pentagon focused on winning the media war, leaking their plan to reporters they could trust.
We knew the plan, and I think the military benefited as far as positive coverage during the war because we knew what the plan was. So we reported that things basically were on plan, or we weren't worried when we got delayed 2 or 3 days because we knew overall it was very successful.
Earlier, when the media pressed for access, Frank's team came up with the idea of embedding reporters. A former corporate PR professional turned Pentagon official ran the program.
One of the things we did, it wasn't rocket science, but it was hard work. We took the same kind of planning and training and discipline that you put into military operations and put it into this aspect of the military operations. And Rumsfeld and Myers, being enlightened guys, had included people like me in the war planning from the very earliest stages.
But Tory Clark got major networks and news organizations to sign a 12-page contract agreeing to certain ground rules that actually kept the Department of Defense, public affairs people in the driver's seat. And you got reporters in with these young, idealistic troops who really believed all the spin of what was going on. We were going to liberate Iraq, that the reporters would overall identify with the troops and their reporting would be very positive.
I'm on the journey, or when we get there, any sort of incident happens, please keep calm and remain on the bus. We will deal with the situation, no matter what it is, as swiftly as possible.
What news organization are you with, Tim?
Sat.1, German television network.
BBC.
CNN.
Los Angeles Times.
Japan Broadcasting Corporation.
I'm Gwendolyn Cates, and I'm here on assignment for People magazine, and I'm embedded with the 205th Battalion, 165th. I was the only journalist embedded with a military intelligence unit. They were part of the 5th Corps based in Germany. And I was invited, in fact, to be embedded by this unit because one of the commanders had gotten to know me and felt that I could be trusted and would really tell the story.
These are your atropine injector kits. Should you become contaminated and start to feel the symptoms
Pentagon
of a nerve
put the embeds through a training course, ostensibly to teach them how to survive, but it went further.
Hold it on there so when you pull it tight.
Journalists were given exaggerated fears of chemical attack designed to reinforce the threat of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. The propaganda was also aimed at the military. It was a threat that wasn't there.
Good to go.
You look lovely.
I lived, ate, slept with the soldiers. And the bond that was established between us was very, very strong and very personal. And we shared the sandstorms together and the lack of food, and people talked to me about their fears and their children had left behind and their fear of death, all those things.
Now that's a piece of equipment.
So I became very personally involved with them as individuals. At the same time, I was observing this with journalistic detachment, but I did place their safety above any sort of journalistic responsibility I had, professional responsibility I had, and I would not have done anything to endanger any of them.
What we're saying is, help us tell the truth of what
Unmentioned
happened.
by most media, the plan actually betrayed an earlier agreement made after the first Gulf War that said, quote, open and independent reporting will be the principal means of coverage. The Pentagon signed off on that policy on March 1st, 1992.
There's an interesting issue of conflict of interest there, because one of the standard rules of journalistic ethics is that journalists should not accept anything of value from the source they're covering. Well, all of their transportation and indeed their very lives were being protected by the soldiers.